change? What influences change? What drives change? Why we go through the periods of change that we go through in businesses? And what we as professionals can do about it. So what we are forced to do in business today is to fundamentally rethink how we've thought about businesses. The first thing I'm going to do is I will explain the change we're seeing in business. The second thing I will do is I will tell you what to do about it. And the third, and perhaps most important thing I will do, is I will tell you why it is most likely that even though I would have come up here, eloquently shared a message, fantastically designed presentation, you will hear and agree with everything I say. It is most likely you will go back to your places of work and do absolutely zero about it. Why is it that as human beings, even though we know we desperately need to change, we don't? Or as we call it today in management studies, the ANC-NEC syndrome. Did you get it? The EFF member got it. You got it, eh? He got it. So why barbarians at the gate? If you ever travel to the city of Rome, and I've had the privilege of going a couple of times to do work, it is said that one day, the great Caesar himself woke up in his room, and his room had a door opening in front of it, the balcony. And if he walked onto the balcony, he had a 180 view of the entire empire of Rome. Rome had 6-meter walls built on it. No one, not in 4,000 years of the strength of the Roman Empire, ever breached those walls. No one. So one day, Caesar wakes up, it's an ordinary day, and he's woken by his servant. And the servant says to him, "Emperor Caesar, the barbarians are calling for you." And the good empire walks out onto the balcony, stands on his balcony, and looks about 400 meters in front of him. And what he sees is the gates of Rome and barbarians marching on his gate. This is important because no one in 4,000 years of Roman history had ever marched on Rome. Marching on Rome would be like declaring war on the United States and the only army you have has AK-47s. You'd have no chance of defeating them. And so Caesar stands, and the words are now immortalized. He stood at the balcony, looked at front, then turned to his servant and said, "I believe this not. Are those barbarians at the gate?" And the servant said, "Yes, Caesar." So what did Caesar do? Well, he did what most CEOs do. He said to his servant, the PA, "Call my generals. Get my CFO, COO, get my head of HR, head of marketing, pull them into a boardroom. We need to talk about this situation." The generals took a while, but they eventually came into Caesar's room, and Caesar said, "So there are barbarians at the gate. What are we going to do?" And the general said, "Well, it's easy. What we need is a strategy meeting. We need to recall the troops. We'll draft a business plan and a business case and then a strategy. Once we're done with that, we'll buy the infantry that we need to fight the actual troops, and then we'll deploy them, and then we'll actually win." And Caesar said, "How long will that take?" They said, "About 2 months." And you'll excuse me, it's not written in history that that's what he said, but I imagine Caesar said, "Are you fucking kidding? Those are barbarians at the gate." So the problem we face in business today is just like Caesar. You and I are facing forces of change that don't need your permission. Entrepreneurs disrupting your spaces don't play by your rules. They don't have risk audit and compliance departments. They don't even know what audit and compliance means. For them, audit compliance is try, fail, get sued, and do it again. It's true. Legal? Well, those are the people we worry about when we've got contracting to receive money from clients. They're not asking for your permission. They're doing it whether you like it or not. My team and I are currently engaged in a project. We're working with the South African Reserve Bank, and Tata Kganyago and his team. And by the way, Tata Kganyago, in my view, is probably the best Reserve Bank governor ever. I have to say that. He's paying us. But he's asking himself an interesting question. If you go to your home today or in your office, and you input a 50 Rand note, scan it, print it, go to the shop and attempt to use it, they will arrest you. Because you are by law not allowed to print currency. Yet, cryptocurrencies which exist on IT platforms using blockchain technology are in essence currency. So how does he take a reserve bank institution that is 200 years old, knows how to police people in paper money, to know how to police and integrate people on the digital virtual world? How does he face his barbarians at the gate? A quick question. Is this the first time man has ever had to encounter change? We looked at this. Our view is no, it isn't. So I want to throw you back to a long, long time ago. If you read the books about the discovery of Homo naledi, you know that what I'm about to say is based on fiction, but is factually true. So, let me introduce you to this guy. He's Mr. Caveman. Why? He was a man, lived in a cave. And Mr. Caveman lived in a difficult world. It was cold. The predators that he lived around were much larger and much more powerful than he. The nights were dark and dangerous. One day, Mr. Caveman, ladies, if you don't know, as we men do in our downtime, was sitting with his friend doing what men do. This huge camaraderie stuff we do when we have downtime. Fuck all. And they were playing around as he and Mr. Caveman were, and they had two little rocks and they were knocking the rocks together. Knocking the rocks together millions of years ago was today's equivalent of watching a FIFA game or the F1. And as they were knocking the rocks together, something happened. The rock sparked. And his friend said, wait, do that again. And he sparked again. So the friend runs outside, collects some dry grass and some sticks, comes back, knocks the rocks consistently until he discovers fire. Why is fire important? Because fire was the very first time man encountered technology. Technology. Not information technology. The classical definition of the word technology is any time man invents something which makes the material nature of his life better. Innovation is any time he invents the same technology and allows it to function in a more efficient way. That's all it is. You're getting locked in 5-6 year ERP projects, spending hundreds of millions of rands to just invent things that help you function better. That's all you're doing. With the discovery of fire, it meant man could light up the dark nights, warm up the cold winters, but perhaps most important, defeat much, much larger predators. Let's now move on to a couple of years, 100 forward. I have to say, for the purpose of this, make a personal declaration, which is that I am Zulu. You can congratulate me. It's true. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but Zulus believe that there are two tribes in the world. Zulus and everybody else. We believe it. We are the best of the best. If you read about the Battle of Isandlwana, we are told that Inkosi Undabezethu Shaka Zulu himself created perhaps the most formidable force of army ever in the history of armies. Perhaps. After his passing, the great Cetshwayo led 20,000 Zulu warriors over the mountains of the Drakensberg down into the valley to fight only 2,000 British warriors. 20,000 Zulu men, 2,000 British. And as the stories of history are now told, we know that the Zulus won that war, but what we are also know for fact is that they won it by a very small margin. How is it possible that arguably the best trained regiment ever is almost defeated by an army the 10th of its size? It's because the British had superior weaponry. They had better technology. Zulus used spears and assegais. The British used guns and cannons. And so the second time man invented something that made his life materially better was the ability to wage war with somebody much greater distance from you today. This was what happened 200 years ago. Today, the Americans are killing people without even being on their territory using drone technology. Firearms and weaponry. Second time man invents something that changes his life. A long time ago, back in Grime's day, you met Grime earlier, people lived in a world where there was no electricity. And if you would, pay careful attention to this, because I want you to go back to HR and tell them this. In the Industrial Revolution, which preeminates in the United Kingdom, not Great Britain, because it was just Britain. Why did they put great there? I didn't get that. But which emanates in the United Kingdom, people used to work from sun up to sundown. Why? Because they worked in factories. Factories were very dangerous. They had no electricity at the time, so you worked from when the sun came up to when the sun went down. In winter, in London specifically, and some of the northern provinces, we know that the sun can come up as late as 7:30 and go down as early as 5:30 in the afternoon. And invented in the Industrial Revolution was the working day of 8 until 5. Your entire employment contract is based on working hours designed thousands of kilometers away 180 some odd years ago. So I think the people that really need the message of change is HR. Now what happened was working in that time was very dangerous. The discovery of electricity meant that man could work for longer periods. Factories could run for 24 hours a day. I, like you, being a finance person, know that the longer you run an instrument of production, a la a factory, what happens is you reduce your marginal cost per product, and at the same marginal revenue, contribution margin increases. In other words, you make yourself more competitive, you deliver better value to the shareholder, and are more fundable than your counterparts. So the discovery of electricity changed the course of business. Long time ago, man used to travel on these things called ships. Hundreds of million rands of investments, 6 years in production. Then they take their ship and put it out to sea, to the elements, and sometimes the ship didn't come back. The Wright brothers thought that problem was broken, so what did they do? They invented the same principles of flight pilots are trained on today. When you get on an airplane, the same principles of flight that pilots are trained on today are the same principles of flight the Wright brothers invented now close on a century ago. So man has been through change. But let me bring it home. Let me ask for some participation. Put up your hand if you ever owned a library card. Anyone here ever had a library card? For those of you whose hands are down, I see why you're in finance. Do you remember? I come from a small township called Wattville in Benoni. So let me tell you, where I come from, you used to climb a taxi from Wattville to Benoni Station, then Benoni Station to what is today Lakeside, which was Benoni, the CBD. You would walk about 4 kilometers to get to the library, and get there, and the librarian, who was the goddess of knowledge, always, remember the librarians, they always looked the same. They always had glasses. They would tilt the glasses slightly down. You remember them? Yeah? Yeah? And you would go and ask the librarian for a book. And without checking on her computer, she knew where the book was. She knew what row it was, next to which book, and what color the cover was. She was a walking index system. Let me ask another question. Anyone here ever been to an empty library? Yeah. That's an important point. Because if the library was never empty, it means that there was no efficient allocation of resources. Efficient allocation of resources means that every single asset should be utilized on every single minute of every single day. If a book is lying fallow on the shelves, that is an asset not in utilization. The problem with the library system was we took knowledge, put it on the center, and said to the user, you come to the place of knowledge. Well, somebody thought that problem was broken, and they invented the internet. If I tell you a fact right now that you can like, you go on Google and you fact check whether or not what I'm saying is true. So knowledge today no longer sits in a single vested physical environment. It is available everywhere, every time, all the time. Yet you and I are functioning in business today as if we still control nodes of knowledge. Like we can control what the customer thinks about our reputation. Like your reputation was ever yours. Did you ever consider that in many of the companies many of you work in, which are large businesses, which probably predate most of your employment, in truth, you are nothing more than the custodian of the brand for the day. The users of those products have been brand ambassadors for those products far longer than you. The true owners of our reputations in business today, no longer is it ourselves, it's the users of that product. Ask that to the team at Top Gear who fired the 3 presenters of Top Gear, brought on a season 22 or 23, and then realized very quickly as the numbers dropped that the user disagreed with the choice management made. And so what do? They make the same choice, they're shooting a second season, and those numbers will drop even further. I want to make a quick point. All of us here think about the internet incorrectly. We believe that the internet is a technology. I will argue now that the internet is not a technology. There are 3 rules that must hold as by Michael Moore's law for something to be a technology. First, someone must create it. 2, someone must own it. And 3, it must sit resident in a physical place. Who owns the internet? Anyone you know? I don't know if you remember. Let me throw you back about 5-6 years ago when Julius was still in the black, green, and gold. And Twitter had just come out, and people were saying some very unkind things about Juju. And Julius had a press conference. It's the same press conference where he called somebody a bloody agent. Do you remember that? Right. So Julius had a press conference, and before the bloody agent incident, a reporter from the Mail and Guardian asked him a question. She said, Julius, you know people are saying things about you on Twitter that are very mean. What are you going to do about it? And Julius, and excuse me for taking the mickey, but I will if I may. Julius said, we are even going to shut down Twitter. And the journalist said, how are you going to do that? Twitter is on the internet. He said, we are even going to march to the internet. Where, Chief? Where? The internet is everywhere all the time. Nobody owns it. I'm speaking at this conference. The conveners of this conference come from the Netherlands. My website, the wireframe, was designed by guys in Cape Town. The graphic user interface was built by guys in Pakistan. I don't know where my website is sitting, but it's sitting somewhere. So where was this transaction originated? In the Netherlands? In Pakistan, Cape Town, or here? The internet is nowhere, which means it is everywhere all the time. The reason your organizations are battling with this Internet of Things, which I think is a terrible term, it should be the Internet in Things. But the reason we're battling with it is because we think the Internet is something we can own. You can't own it. It's everywhere all the time. And that I perhaps think is the biggest form of change we're facing today. Second point I want to make now very quickly is that I think as South Africans we don't understand that there is a big difference between transformation and change. Now allow me some latitude here. I'm not talking about transformation in the changing of the demographic sense, and whilst important, that project must happen. But that's not what I mean. I'm talking about a different type of transformation. And the best way to understand it is through the image on screen. Change is how the frog becomes. It starts a small seed, the tadpole. The seed, as it grows and consumes food, grows a tail. The tail disappears, legs emerge, and the frog becomes. But the substance of what starts as the seed is the substance of what ends as the frog. That is change. What we are dictates what we become. Transformation is how the butterfly becomes. It starts out the crummy, hairy, leggy, stinky, slimy, dark, hugely unattractive caterpillar. Every time my daughter sees one, she says, Daddy, listen. So don't do that, my girl. And what happens? The caterpillar decides that it doesn't like its life. It cocoons itself, incubates, hives off, and when it emerges something that in no way resembles the beginning form, the beautiful butterfly. Now, over the next 2 days, you guys are going to talk a lot about change, factors of change and transformation and all the rest of it and what is affecting you. And you will use change thinking in a transformative environment. You will think about how do we build frogs when in essence your market is asking you how do you create a butterfly. And this is hard because sometimes it means changing our management structures and it means learning from other organizations. The image on screen is a great organization to learn from. You remember the good people of Nokia? You remember them? You know the history of Nokia? They started out making paper. Nokia started out making paper. They were a paper milling business. And then from paper, they moved into the industrial sector, from industry into agriculture, and they became, as Samsung is today, a large, diversified business. Nokia, by chance, moved into telephony. In fact, Nokia was, in Finland, what telecom is today. They were laying fiber and cabling for the telephony environment. And out of that, they then got into mobile telephony and into the creation of phones. So Nokia had the propensity for change. They could move from industry to industry to industry. But where is Nokia today? It went from good to great to gone. Why? My view, it's quite unkind, but I'll say it, is because Nokia was no longer run by entrepreneurs, it was run by managers. People who worried more about pleasing shareholders and maintaining market share and delivering quarter-on-quarter profit than whether or not Nokia was significant in the first place. Did you ever ask yourself why Paul, the CEO of Unilever, doesn't do any more quarterly announcements? He says, why am I reporting to analysts every 3 months? I need to build a business that is here in 100 years' time. And you can't measure significance in short quarterly periods. And yet in business today, even though we know these things, we continue to do them. So very quickly, I've touched on change. I've touched on transformation. I've touched on the journey of man and how he has had to face both forces. Now I want to make on my next point. Over the next 2 days, there will be a lot of talk and conversation about this word disruption. You will talk about it. You will use it. People will have it in their presentations. But very few of us understand when it happens. Working as an entrepreneur, my job is to disrupt. That's what I do. I look for opportunities to disintermediate and create value. So as a firm, we asked ourselves this question. We said, when does disruption occur? And after mountains of data and reading thousands of academic papers published on it, we came to a single conclusion. Disruption occurs when 3 things happen. When you do something cheaper or better or faster than your competitor. Or God help your competitor if you can do all 3. That's all disruption is. All these conversations we're going to have over the next 2 days, all we're trying to figure out is how do we deliver better value, do it quicker, and at a much higher margin, charging lower prices than our competitors. How do we do it cheaper, better, and faster? That's all disruption is. That's all it is. And what it is driven by is understanding that all customers make decisions to buy driven by 3 key resources. Save them time, save them energy, and save them resources. If you save your customers these 3 things and you do it cheaper and better faster, you disrupt. That's all disruption is. So don't get caught in the long, lengthy academic discussions and conversations about how do we disrupt our marketplaces. Understand that this is all disruption is. Now that I've made the point, let me jump on to a second point, which is, do also not make the mistake of assuming that your competitors are the people you thought were your competitors, and your operating environment are the geographical boundaries to which you are inhibited. Because that is not true. Your competitors today are no longer the people you know, and the geography in which you operate is no longer part of your SWOT analyses or Porter's 5 forces, because the world is converged. And I will use 2 case studies to prove it. Anyone here ever used or heard of Hello Peter? Yeah? Put up your hand if you've ever used Hello Peter. Put up your hand if you've used Hello Peter in the last 5 days. That's what I thought. Peter Shields, by the way, is a dear friend of mine. He built Hello Peter, great company. What happened to Hello Peter? Well, Hello Peter was essentially a campaign platform. You went and complained about a client or a supplier. You logged your complaint, and Peter had a centralized system through which he rated the complaint and then went to the corporate companies and got them the opportunity to respond to that complaint. That process took anything between 7 and 14 days. Today, if you want to complain, where do you go? You go on Twitter. All companies have Twitter accounts. You complain now, they respond now. What's the cost? 0. Peter was charging corporate companies money to subscribe to the Hello Peter service. Twitter said it's gratis. Do you see it? It happened. Now, and please, the black people here, let's not lie to each other about each other. Okay. Anyone here ever had a yellow pages? Black hands, all of your hands should be up now. All of you. I don't know if you know this too. You know, and this is a part of a cultural conversation we've not had in this country. Blacks and whites. White people and black people did not have yellow pages for the same reason. You know where I'm going, eh? The whites had them to actually phone. The blacks, apartheid was rough for us. So, on the 13th of the month, the double ply was finished. And then you remember when you used to do it, the people with the toilet outside, the one used to pull the you see, hey, ANC's been good to us, guys, eh? Look at you now, clever blacks. I'm just kidding. What happened to Yellow Pages? Well, great business by Trudon. It was essentially a classifieds business. Suppliers put their products in Yellow Pages. Customers would use that Yellow Pages. And then Google happened. And all of a sudden, on Google, I could get the information I wanted about a company, up to date, live, all the time. Both of these examples prove disruption doesn't care where you are. It doesn't care what you do. Doesn't care how big you are. It will happen whether you like it or not. Because customers are loyal to themselves. Go tell marketing that customer loyalty is a lie. Read the latest document now, published by the Harvard Business Review. In their latest article, they talk about the fallacy of customer loyalty. All customers, yourselves included, are not loyal. To be loyal would infer that we forgive. When you're loyal, you forgive. When there's a discrepancy, you forgive. When you're unhappy, you forgive. Customers are not loyal. Customers are habitual. They buy from you out of habit. You go to the traffic light, you go to the same petrol station you go to out of habit. The same retailer, out of habit. You buy the clothes out of habit. You're not loyal to anyone. You're not getting paid for this stuff. They try to rope you in using loyalty points, but the points take 1,000 years to accrue to buy a pack of chappies, so who cares? So this fallacy about customer loyalty must be debunked. So, what holds us back? And then I'll be done. I said to you, I'll tell you the change that happens. I've explained. I've told you why it happens and how to understand it. And I've explained the drivers of that change. Now I'm going to tell you why it is likely you will go back to your businesses and do nothing about it. And that is because all of us in this room are driven by three key things. The first is what we know. The second is what we believe. And the third, and I want to spend a moment on this, is this thing we call like for unlike comparison. The last version of a typewriter was better than its contemporary version of a computer. For those of you who don't know, Smith Corona, the world's largest producer of typewriters, got to a point where they made typewriters with word processor. Word processor, the technology used on your computer, was invented by a typewriter company. It's kind of like how Kodak invented digital film. Smith Corona was beginning to make typewriters that were as small as your laptop is today. However, the typewriter was still an old, inferior technology. And so the leaders of Smith Corona compared the typewriter of the day to the computer of the day. They compared an old form of technology in its best form to a new form of technology in its most nascent form. Thousands of business leaders make these mistakes every single day. You compare how fantastic the world was as you have built it rather than how the world is going to be as you need to exist in it. Smart, ne? I thought it was smart. So Smith Corona made the same mistake. They pursued market share, not purpose share. So how do you fit in? Well, simple. Each of you here, I think, need to understand that you're driven by a set of biases and that your problem essentially as an organization is broken. By show of hands, have any of you here ever been to a McDonald's? Come on, don't lie. Sir, your tummy, you definitely been. You live there. Breakfast, lunch, and supper. Now, has anybody here ever been to a Shake Shack? Yeah, 1, 2. People who've traveled internationally will know about Shake Shack. In the United Kingdom, they've got Giraffe. What is the value proposition of McDonald's? 2 words: fast food. McDonald's, over the past 100 years, has built a phenomenal business out of delivering food as fast as possible. The emphasis is on fast, not food. So no matter where in the world you go, they will serve you A Big Mac meal, medium size, with a Coke in 4 minutes, 39 seconds. If it takes longer than that in the drive-thru, you'll notice a young lady comes to the front of the drive-thru and asks you to pull out. You've seen that? That's happened to me in Benoni, it's happened in Brooklyn, it's happened in Bangkok, it's happened in Bangalore. Everywhere in the world, they have the same standard operating processes for delivering fast food, and they're good at it. Except, they've gotten really good in the world customers don't want to live in anymore. Customers are saying, we don't want fast food. We want food fast. Yeah, the time is important, but even more important is the quality of the food. Because people are getting cancer now. I'm worried about obesity and sugar levels and the rest of it. And so what's happened is Shake Shack is disrupted McDonald's, moving from fast food to food fast. And the images prove it. The images prove it. So the point I want to make here very quickly is don't be caught in the world as you knew them. Anyone here have a Netflix account? Netflix users, come on. Hands up, don't lie, don't lie. The rest of you? It's rough, guys. Did you guys see what Claudio Mutswaneng's email is? sapc@cloud.co.za. Did you see that? It's that's a joke, that's a joke. But the SAPC don't book me, so I can make the joke. So the great guys at Netflix have this business. Anyone know the history of Netflix? The guy who started it created a business where you could rent movies using the website. At first, and listen to this quickly, he didn't own the stock. So you would go on the website and rent the movie. He would go to the local video rental store, collect the movie, post it to you. Over 2 days, you'd receive it, watch it, post it back to him. He would deliver it and charge a margin. That was his business. Then over time, he made enough money that he built a garage and he bought a dialogue or category or catalog of movies. He stored them and then he would ship them to you as and when you rented them. Then he realized that that model was old. So what he did is he took the movies, loaded them up on a server, and you could hire the movie and stream it and watch it. So he went from video rental to streaming as core revenue drivers. What's the core revenue driver of Netflix today? It's not streaming, it's content. He's now making the series that are being streamed. That's his core business. How do you know? Look at their income statement and their balance sheet. Last year, in a year where they made $750 million EBITDA, he spent $120 million in the production of season 4 of House of Cards alone. Orange is the New Black, and I mean the series, not Donald Trump. He spent $82 million in the production of the last season of Orange is the New Black. So he has cannibalized himself. Video rental, video streaming, content production. Do you see it? He's eating himself up before somebody has to do it. Adrian Gore used to work at Liberty, went to Liberty and said, why don't we create a system through which we incentivize our clients to perform better? Liberty said it wouldn't work, so he left and he's killed himself. And he's essentially destroyed the Liberty system. And now Liberty is having to incentivize you because Vitality works so well. Outsurance said, why is it outsurance, not insurance? Why do we pay our customers for not claiming? And now almost every single insurer offers you some sort of benefit for not claiming. Do you get it? The disruption happens. It doesn't need your approval. It doesn't need your approval. So, I'm going to stop at this graph. I want to spend 2 minutes very quickly on this graph. Try and make a note of this graph in your head. Make a note of it because it's really, really important. It is a culmination of everything I have shared here today. More specifically, as finance professionals, this is the graph that will summarize our conversation over the past 40 minutes. When we know we need to change, we know why we need to change. Why don't we do it? Or as my mother would say, why mtanam? Why? Here's why. You see the line at the top there? Notates revenue growth. And the line here notates disruption propensity over time. Here's what happens. I don't care what company you work in. Whether you're in a large bank, an insurance company, an IT company, an auditing company, all of the companies you all work in were once upon a time a startup. All of them. Deloitte, SAP, and I'm actually speaking at an SAP conference in London tomorrow. Adapt IT, Oracle, Click, Excel, Serviced, All of these companies were once startups. There was a time when somebody came up with it and started it. That person, the founder, drove the business. He drove the strategy. He focused on the customer. He focused on becoming significant and important in the customer's life. And over time, he accumulated a growth in relevance. He made higher revenues, and then the business stabilized. And as it stabilized, what did he do? He hired chartered accountants and CFAs and finance professionals and SEMA people to come and manage his business. But when he hired them all, they were not there when he started the business. So they have no corporate memory of the early days. Do you get it? So what happens? Well, something happens. A blip in the system. A disruption occurs. A new entrant happens. The internet changes. I don't know. 1,000 things affecting your environment. That's what happens. At that time, the leaders of that business must make a critical decision. Do we do what we always have done, and I don't care how long it takes, you will die? Or do we go to the finance department, ask them to make us as efficient as possible, and they will do. They'll cut costs, they'll automate, they'll outsource processes, and they'll make us efficient, but they'll make us efficient at making the old thing? Or do we ask ourselves the difficult questions about how do we innovate and build businesses for the future? This is the ultimate challenge we are facing in business today. That what is required to lead us to a new place where we build businesses that are significant in the new world requires of us that we unlearn what we know and we learn what we don't yet understand. That we kill the barbarians at our gates. Thank you.